So today I'm joined by a good friend of mine who I'm currently involved in with a project that we're working on, which we're hoping is going to come to light in the next few months. I could say I've invited her along as a guest on the podcast and welcome Sarah.
Hi,
How you doing?
feeling deeply uncomfortable.
I know, don't worry, you'll be okay. So Sarah has, in the last couple of years, recently become divorced, and she drew attention to there is a lot around divorce, not the breakup of the relationship, but a lot around divorce that is not always spoken about and comes as a bit of a surprise to you. What was the biggest surprise about divorce for you?
That's a big one to start with.
Well, I thought we jumped straight in.
Right. The biggest surprise. So I have a good friend who started going through a divorce about 6 years ago. And I remember when she first spoke to us about it, she said that the thing that surprised her the most was that divorce was deeply personal experience. And I think that's the biggest surprise to me, is just how unique it is to the actual person going through it. You can try and explain to someone what it feels like, but unless you're in it, it's near impossible.
Okay, and yours has been a very amicable divorce, which I think probably cuts out a lot of the hostility that other people might experience. But in terms of suddenly finding yourself in a sort of a husband and wife situation to then you're both on your own, what was the biggest change that you noticed straight away?
Immediately.
Wa- Was there a sudden quietness in the house once the kids had gone to bed, or was there anything that really surprised you?
I think probably, not to say that our situation is unique, because I'm sure there's sort of thousands of people out there whose husbands were the ones that went out to work and worked long hours and worked incredibly hard for, for the children, for the family. So I'd found myself on my own long before I was technically on my own. So we actually lived together still for another year after we'd separated. So the house didn't sort of suddenly fall quiet. I have three children, so it's never really quiet. But also, it had always been kind of quiet anyway. So that sort of change on an evening, where I know I've spoken to other people that have noticed, suddenly they're cooking dinner on their own, they're putting the kids to bed on their own. I was already doing that, so it was an easy shift.
Was there anything about that suddenly being single, which we'll get to afterwards, that surprised you? So, for instance, a lot of people mention about the bins. That's their one thing that they seem to sort of, I didn't know about the bins. Suddenly I had to put the bins out on a certain day at a certain time. I mean, was there anything like that that suddenly you thought, no one tells you about this part of divorce?
Oh, I have so many ridiculous ones. Screenwash in the car. I'd never put my own screenwash in. And I drove around for a really long time in January. Not this January, it was the January just gone, with no screenwash in the car. And I happened to mention it to one of my best friends, that I was struggling with those sort of small elements of being single. And she went out that day and she bought me screenwash and a bottle of Pinot Noir and met me at school later. And in the end, there was about 4 or 5 of my friends around as we sort of popped the hood, and she showed me how to fill it up with screenwash. But yeah, the bins are a big one. Recently, again, and this is really embarrassing to say, but for the first time in a year and a half, I put the plastic and the paper out on the right day. My dad, bless him, will come around and we go through the garage and then we take it all to the tip together. These are small, embarrassing things, but things that I never did on my own.
Yeah.
I went, I guess, from my parents' house then to living with someone, and I was never responsible for the bins, the spiders. That's another really difficult one. I think I texted you once and said this is the reason people stay in difficult marriages, is because of the spiders. I'm not very good, and I have 3 kids that I have to be brave for.
I think, like, when you're going through emotional times, I often find it's not the big things that tend to break you. It's the really small things that just open up the door to all the big things just to come out. So in terms of your, I guess, started going through the divorce as it was, how has been, like, because obviously you're co-parenting together. I think anyone that gets divorced, I know sort of people say they're single mums, single dads, but I think if you're both in their life, you're still the mum and the dad, no matter what. No matter if people meet other people, I'm very big on they've only got one mum, one dad. They might have other people come in their life that will be friends, influences, whatever it may be. But did it change for you being like a single parent? Was that a big step?
I think there's one real positive thing from being, say, quote unquote, a single parent, and neither of us really were single parents. We parent together.
Yeah.
But we probably parent in different ways. We do parent in different ways. But what living separately has done is, and neither are bad, they're just different,
Yeah.
is that he's got the space to be the dad and the parent in the good moments and in the difficult moments on his own. And I can then do the exact same thing at my home, that I respond immediately as I deem appropriate. And that has taken away a lot of conflict between the two of us. We're not fighting about the way each other parents. We know we're both good at it and we're able to do it in our own little different ways. And no, I mean, we communicate all the time. So anything that's slightly big, we'll speak about together. And in that moment, decide what the best way is moving forward. But the day-to-day stuff, it's removed the conflict.
I know from conversations you've told me that you're still very good friends. So what's it both been like for you as single people now? Do you sort of share sort of stories about what it's like actually to be single?
Yes, we have shared some stories about what it's like to be single. We've both joked about dating apps
Okay.
and, sort of staying away from them at the moment, because it seems like the dating world, the single world, is sort of this much larger, scarier place than it was back when we were in our 20s.
So that's what I was thinking, because that must be quite interesting where both before you were single and then obviously being married and being together and then coming away from it, suddenly going, what's gone on in the last 10 years? When did this become so difficult?
We have this bi-monthly, monthly lunch that we jokingly call the DMZ, which is the demilitarized zone between North Korea and South Korea. And we picked it as a place that we would go, and it's a little anonymous pub of ours, and we go and we have lunch and we do share stories, we do have a laugh, we talk about the bigger stuff too, but it's that way of sort of removing kind of conflict from our relationship as co-parents. We keep some things private, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, probably obviously best to do. So in terms of how have the kids sort of found it, you know, in the transition, because you've got three children, different ages, so I would imagine that it's a different story for each of them, maybe.
I think we both made a commitment very, very, very early on, long before anyone else knew, that the three kids were the most important thing. And every decision we make is made thinking about them first.
And that's the way I think it should be, because the one thing that you and I always think about this in terms of relationships that you've had, that you may look back on the relationship and regret things about it, but you'd never change anything because of the kids that you've now got. I'm not that with my son. I look at it now and think, if I hadn't have met his mum and I'd had children with someone else, I wouldn't have that particular kid, and I wouldn't want any other kid other than him. So when you look back, it's one, it's emotional, but two, it's like you can't have any regrets about anything that you've done previously, because otherwise you wouldn't have those kids now.
No, I wouldn't change it all. And also I still want him in my life. And people do laugh. They think we're bonkers that we have insisted on maintaining a friendship. And we're lucky. I suppose that's the other thing. We're lucky that, because I know it's not like that way for everyone. I think things happen in relationships that maybe in marriages that you can't and shouldn't have to move past. But for us, we've worked very hard at establishing a new friendship, really.
So what have you found the biggest challenges about single parenting? In terms I know you're co-parenting, but I mean both of you together as separate parents. Have you ever sat down when you have these sort of more meetings and gone, I didn't realise that was that hard, or
Yeah, I think as the kids sort of go through different stages, like, progressing from like childhood, sort of preteen into teens, I think we're both kind of blown away by different things they do. And being the one that's been largely responsible for the primary caregiver, but he'll come up to me and go like, wow, she likes to shop. There you go. She does. They get really big really quickly. I'm like, yeah, I know.
So going back to you, Sarah, in terms of being a single life, what things are sort of exciting you again? And what was the biggest surprise? When I sort of refer to single, I don't mean single dating single, but actually, being single on your own in a house in sort of your own space now.
I think there's sort of many different layers to it. I think the biggest surprise initially was, and you hear about it because divorce is on TV. It's your friends. I think most people will know a relative or a friend or a parent that's been through a divorce, and people talk about the grief. And I don't think this is another one that until you go through it, no one sort of prepares you for that level of grief because you're sort of grieving mostly, I think, the life you presumed you're going to have. I think most people do this, where you project into the future and you say, I'd like to buy this kind of house in 3 or 4 years' time, or go on this holiday, or I'd like the kids to get to that school, or I'd like them to become this sort of job. And you sort of try to set up and picture your life, and we'll have Christmases here and we'll do that. And maybe one year we'll go on vacation. And then all of a sudden that looks nothing like you ever had planned. And it's sort of, for a really, tired term, sort of the rug's been like pulled out from underneath your feet and you sort of stare blankly into nowhere. But then there's times that then feels really exciting because you're effectively writing this new chapter of your life. And it's almost anything you could want it to be. But at the same time, you're battling with grieving what you don't have. And I think the hardest part of it, taking me out of it, was you're then grieving the life you thought you were going to give your children.
So you made the decision, or you made the decision together, that he was going to carry on his career, you was going to stop your career, and then obviously have children and stay at home. Do you ever not regret that decision, but kind of think you wish you'd have carried on working and found other ways sort of to parent the children?
No, not at all. I wouldn't. And this isn't to take away from anyone else who would obviously choose differently, but I never missed anything. Every sort of Mother's Day at preschool, or sports fixture, parents' evening, picking them up when they're sick at school, like, I wouldn't personally change any of that. Would I maybe encourage, my daughter to hold on to her career? Possibly. But for me, myself, I'd do it all again.
So with the children, obviously I would imagine you got three, as you said. They are, I say, close in age. There's probably 6, 7 years between them.
4.
4 years between them all, very close. 4 years between them. So, like, in terms of blocks and parenting, what was the hardest block?
This one?
Now,
As they become teenagers?
really?
Yeah, I remember my mom's best friend saying to me when my eldest was only 4 weeks old, and I was very much in the depths of sleep deprivation and fear, and I'll never cope with this. And I remember sitting there, and I'd gone up to visit my parents who lived in the northeast of England at the time, and holding this little 4-week-old baby, and she asked to hold him, and I handed him over, and she said, "Oh, Sarah," she's like, "enjoy this." She's like, "This is the easy part." I was like, this can't be easy. Like, I'm drowning. And now I wish I could go back and hold a little 4-week-old baby, maybe because I'm much more confident that I would know what I was doing and I can cope with the lack of sleep. But yeah, I think maybe it never gets harder, it just changes.
Because I would have,
It was before my eldest started school and my youngest was newborn, and I had about 6 months where I had all 3 of them at home by myself. There was 2 or 3 days a week where there'd be a couple of hours at preschool, but it was just me and them. And I remember being really excited about it because I thought, I'm never going to get this ever again in my entire life where I have all 3 of my kids at home, just me. We didn't do a great deal, but there was a lot of sort of discos in the lounge. I didn't, again, apart from the chronic sleep deprivation, which I got a bit of a handle on, that was not the hard part.
so you say now.
Yes. In 2 years, I'll probably say then.
Because I was just thought like once they start going to school, I would have thought you start to get more time to sort of like grab back for yourself and go, right, I've got a couple of hour period now where I can do something for myself before I actually get on with what essentially is the job, a full-time job at that, of being a parent.
Yeah, but I started my own business when my littlest was 3. So he was at home working with me for a year and a half before he went to school. So it was very much filled. There was no all 3 are in school and suddenly I'm watching daytime TV.
So going on to your business, so what business is it that you do now?
I have an at-home, primarily kids celebration cake business.
And how has that been? Did that start from COVID, you
It
said?
started in yeah, it started in COVID. Some lovely friends of mine asking me if I could drop off cakes on their doorstep when all businesses had to shut down. So I did that a couple of times and then very quickly registered a business. And then it sort of grew from there. And again, we had sort of 2 years of in and out of lockdowns where people needed that sort of help and that injection of fun.
So you enjoyed it?
Love it.
Because I did a podcast with a therapist who said to me, like, through COVID, a lot of people actually got into doing stuff with their hands, and it was an art therapist who said that was a way of coping with the stress of everything that was going on, and that's when those skills sort of developed. Did you find that as well?
I think I can see that. I'd kind of always done it. So I hadn't done it as a job, but I'd always done it for fun since I was very, very little. So for me, it was just more of an extension of that. But I can see how doing something creative and physical would have benefited people at that time. Yeah.
So do you think, because there are certain businesses where the actual end product is maybe people perceive as expensive because they don't realise what's actually gone into all the work. I would just presume baking's probably one of those, is it?
Yeah, 100%. I think anyone who works for themselves would agree with me that it's hard to show everything that goes into something that's just yours.
Because you've got your Instagram account, obviously, that we'll put that on here as well, that people can go to and look at, the work you do. But I know when I've got prices for cakes before, I've always been like, "Wow, that's really expensive. I can get a Peter the Caterpillar or whatever they're called for like Colin, how's it? Colin the Caterpillar for like 7.95, and you can still eat Colin 7 months afterwards."
It's doing a disservice to Colin. I don't think Colin's got that large a shelf life. But yes, there are cakes you can go into the shops and buy that will last months and months and months and months and months. But you can't sort of read any of the ingredients on the back.
Is it not good?
Depends what you're looking for.
Okay, so we're going to go back to your newly found single life.
Yes.
How's that looking, and what's happening with that? And then, like I say, not in terms of relationship, but just in terms of being single, because it's very different to being with someone.
It's hilarious. It's a completely different sort of landscape to my mid-20s. But it's definitely providing some good laughs for many of my dear friends. And I'm not the only single one. There's plenty of them. I go to this wonderful gym, and what the owner there has created is this space for women to, in sort of midlife, in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s even. And we go and we strength train, and he acts as a lovely sort of life coach slash therapist slash personal trainer. And we share stories, whether that's about, say, a date that someone's been on, or a new relationship that they're having, or navigating stuff with children, ex-partners, their new relationships. And so, yeah, we kind of all sit around, have a bit of a laugh. And I think when you've got such a busy life with, say, with children, with a job, with other hobbies that you've got, at this point in life anyway, it's really hard to sit around and be sad at times, because you kind of get to, I don't know if you've ever got to this point where, like I said earlier about how you project into the future and things you want to achieve, things, you expect to achieve, things you're working towards. And then divorce is such a humbling experience in that you start going, well, I can only cope with the next hour, or I can only cope with today, or I can only cope with this moment, whether it's like, I'm feeling really bad, I've had a bad day and I'm just lying in bed with my daughter watching Traitors on TV, and I go, okay, this moment's good. because you don't look far into the future, which means you can kind of take it a little less seriously and a little more day by day, as opposed to going, God, I'm never going to be with anyone ever again, or I'm going to have a really bad day and my friends are going to laugh tomorrow.
So you had your first child at what age?
29.
So in terms of ages for having kids, would you ever think that, like, I wish I'd have waited till I was 34, 35, had more of a period of time early in marriage that we were together? Or do you think like that was a good time to have kids? If you did it all again, same story, so you still end up with the same guy, same kids, but would you choose to do those at a different time?
No, and I know we differ on what age is a good age to have children.
I think it's very different for, like, for men.
Yeah.
I really do.
No, I would go earlier.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's exhausting having kids. I think just in terms of the female body, by the time I was pregnant for the third time, it was very quickly my body was like, you're doing this again? Like this, here we go. Which obviously for a man, you can't necessarily feel that sort of physical strain that the body goes through, even in like, especially actually in the first 3 months. You know, it's phenomenal what we do. But there is a reason I think that women were originally designed to have children much younger, because the body copes with it. I think thanks to medicine, obviously, we can keep doing it to well into our 40s.
Yeah.
And obviously fertility hasn't completely declined, but I definitely found a difference even just in a 4-year period of how physically hard I found it. And I used to often say to my eldest, I'd be like, you know, you had my youth. And to my youngest, I'd be like, but you've got my experience. I was much more physically able to cope with pregnancy with the eldest and much more relaxed with the youngest. And the middle one, you know, she was my girl, so.
Because you've got two boys
And a girl, yeah.
So what, in terms of girls and boys, I've only had a boy, I ever had a boy, and I think boys are more difficult at certain times. But as a package up until now, who do you think are like highest maintenance, girls or boys?
Declined to answer that one.
So okay, let me ask you again. So if you could have either 5 girls or 5 boys, which one would you think I'll go for?
Oh, I can't pick because honestly, both are brilliant, and both come with the difficulties, shall we say. 5 of the same as a mother. Oh, you can't pick. You can't. What would you pick? You can only have 5 of each. As
I'd probably go with boys.
5 boys.
The stress of girls, boyfriends, marriages, and everything else, that would just, I find that boys take care of themselves a little bit more. I think they're more worried in some ways, but I just think as a guy with a girl, I would just worry too much. I think it would just exhaust me.
Yeah, I'm not going to pick.
Okay, we'll leave you on the fence there. So I know you said you wanted to ask me a couple of questions as well, because while we were working on this project, we have a lot of conversations because we have very different views on a lot of things. And you asked me a lot of questions to do with the project that we're working on. And we have quite long discussions from it because we've had very, very different lives.
The main one was that you've never been married, and correct me if I'm wrong, longest relationship was 3 years-ish, 4 years?
4 or 5 years, yeah.
4 or 5 years. My question was, what do you think would be different if you had necessarily been married for those 4 or 5 years as opposed to just being in a relationship? And is actually the grief of coming out of a partnership, a marriage, a long-term relationship, is it effectively the same? And actually marriage is literally just the piece of paper.
I think marriage is the piece of paper that makes it far more complicated to get out of. It's very difficult when you've been married, I haven't, but from speaking to people that are going through divorce, like you have to involve so many other people in it. You know, I think the nuts and bolts of breakups are very similar in terms of being married, not being married, in terms of the split in friends, the split in parents, whoever it may be. I mean, my mum is still really good friends with Zach's mum, and which I don't have a problem with, but I think a lot of people may find that a bit odd that they're so close. But I think if you get on with people, you get on with people, and that should be the way it should be, no matter what happens with that relationship themselves. In the same way, I do think that if when you're getting divorced, you're divorcing the person as a relationship. You're not divorcing them as a parent. So in your case, for example, which is the same as everyone else's divorce, is that you both don't stop being a team in terms of you're the mum and the dad together for the kids. You're both their mum and dad. What changes is that you're just not together in a relationship anymore, but you've still got a parental relationship to the kids. And I think that's where some divorces of, maybe someone's cheated on someone else. And I think that's what can get complicated because there becomes resentment. And that seems to be the biggest downfall of divorce is the resentment then spills over into the right, I'm going to get you back by you're not going to see the kids.
That's true unless you're divorcing and you don't have any children.
But is divorcing without children a lot simpler?
I don't know. I think in terms of when I was speaking to you just there about like grieving the future, I think that applies across the board, whether you have children or not. You're still, I imagine, and I might be wrong, having an idea of where that relationship is going and where your future is going. And even in your relationship you've spoken about that was a difficult breakup, you had an idea of where it was going.
I don't know if we did have an idea of where it was going. I think sometimes you don't plan, you kind of just go along with things. And
Do you think it's a male and female thing then, that women are more inclined to think into the future, plan a path, and men just go more along with it?
I think from my experience, I've seen that happen a lot more in terms of guys seem to fall into marriage and sort of seem to be going along with it in terms of where women, I think, because of it's like, right, I want to have kids by the time I'm 29 because I don't want to be 40 when I'm having kids. So if I'm going to do that, I'm going to need a man by the time I'm 27 because I want to be with them for 2 years to make sure they're the right guy. So I think sometimes you can methodically plan. I think other times you could meet people, you're on a journey that you haven't thought about where's it going. You're just on it. And some of those turn out fantastically well and some don't. But I don't think men plan as much. And I think that's general about not just their relationships, it's about a lot of things.
So do you think if women weren't that fussed then about marriage, that men wouldn't do it?
I don't know.
This is what you and I think. I'm super skeptical about it now.
About marriage as a whole.
Yeah, I want someone to want to be with me because they want to be with me, not because they're legally like obligated to be
I
with
think
me.
that's the thing. I think it's the get out.
Yeah.
I think if you're, and then that's what I found from my experience was our breakup wasn't messy in terms of the logistics because it's basically right. One of you move out, sort out the house.
Yeah.
The biggest logistical thing was obviously we had a child together, and that was the most difficult thing for us. But I guess if you've got houses and it's like right, we've got to sell the house, split the house, whatever it may be, I think it becomes harder. But maybe you'd still have those problems if you weren't married. In terms of and in the nicest way, and not in a your relationship way, but if I was to ask you and your ex-husband and said, what was the hardest part, the divorce or the breakup?
Neither of those. It's the bit before that. The bit before you decide that you're better off separate as friends.
I mean, you guys are very lucky in terms of that you say good friends, and I think you're lucky that you say good friends. Do you think that's always possible? Or do you think that's something that both of you can do, but you've got to just let go of whatever came before?
No, I don't think it's always possible. I think certain things happen that there isn't a way back from, or there isn't a way through to a sort of amicable resolution. But I think that it does happen. I think it's, it's a good goal, but I wouldn't want to say that anyone who can't achieve that is doing their children a disservice. Because I think certain things do happen that you can't and you shouldn't sort of move past.
Because I always found with breakups, especially when you've been living with people, one of you has to be the one that lets go of more than the other person. I don't know if you found that from not your own situation, but from friends of yours that have got divorced that you spoke to, where one of you has to just get to the stage where you go, like, I know what's gone on, but I really, like, it's gone. I don't care anymore. But in order for us to move forward, we've just got to go from this point forward, as opposed to just keep going, well, remember when you did that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a really hard thing to do, isn't it? To finally, it's almost like trying to force yourself to be more of a grown up, because it's a very, very childlike thing to be like, oh, but she said, but he said, but you did, but.
Yeah.
And you do kind of have to get to the point where actually it doesn't even benefit yourself anymore to be hung up on things that have been said or things that have happened. Don't even really need to know the reason why sometimes those things happened. I think that the best thing you can do is just accept it and move forward. But again, that's taken, 2 years of therapy to get to that point. You do have to come to accept that you can't change the past. So it's really stressful to stay fixated on it and doesn't benefit either person.
I mean, you've alluded to it slightly there. We won't go into it too much today. But do you think for people that are in those situations that therapy is a really big help?
Yes. I'd advocate for therapy just like as a casual check-in in a really sort of like settled life. I think it, and in particular in really difficult periods of time as well. I'm a huge, sounds weird to say, fan of therapy. I think it's incredibly beneficial.
To everyone?
Yeah, definitely. I think everyone could use it. It's uncomfortable. I get it. Like,
No, it's not. I don't think it's uncomfortable.
doesn't seem like you find it uncomfortable.
No, no, I think you're used to either dealing with things on your own or not. And I'm dealing with things on my own type of guy.
That doesn't mean that you wouldn't benefit from speaking to someone. I think a lot of the conversations we've had have been sort of therapeutic on a level for you.
It depends upon how, you know the person, or I mean, I know it can be easier to talk to a stranger, but sometimes I just think they don't really this, they didn't know me
But they do.
because you're paying them.
Well, it is their job.
No, and I don't mean that in a bad way. My personal opinion on therapy is that anything that works for someone, they should do. Whether that's sort of go for a run,
Mhm.
go and speak to someone. I think it's to do with the individual and how the individual is wired in terms of do what's good for you. I wouldn't judge, say, oh, no, why would you need to speak to a therapist? Because I think if it works, do it.
Yeah, I think just probably my opinion is it would work for everyone if they allowed it. And I do think there's a natural barrier for people to not want to. In fact, you spoke about this on was it your last podcast, about whether you ever really truly know yourself or someone else? And there is an element of exposure and vulnerability in speaking to a stranger and them asking the right questions and listening at the right moment that kind of can make you more aware of yourself and allow someone else to, see you more.
No, see, look, so the project that we're working on, it's enabled us to have lots of conversations about relationships, about sort of being single in relationships and going through different situations in being relationships. And from a lot of those discussions, we found that they've been really helpful to the project that we're doing, but also probably to a wider community as well, because it's a lot of the stuff that the feedback that we get on the podcast from lots of women are the same things that, are about the premise of the discussions that we have. So we are going to do more of these together moving forward, just so that there can be a voice of a female on there, if it's something, you'd like to do as well. So I think that's what we're going to do moving forward. But listen, I thank you so much for coming along today. I've really enjoyed it.
It's only mildly terrifying.
I know I think it becomes easier. Usually I'm just in there talking to myself. So really appreciate you coming along, and actually for your honesty and openness about sharing your story, because I think they do help other people as well. So I appreciate that. Well, guys, thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate you listening to 50 Shades and Grey. Make sure you subscribe and follow as ever, and we'll catch up with you soon. And we'll put all Sarah's details on the Instagram as well. Take care. Goodbye.